4 miles less. And so, proportionally, they've got a lot more money in their pockets than the average metropolitan resident. And where do they spend that money? Well, because they're riding bikes, because they're typically walking to get to their destinations, they're spending it. They're going to their local commercial districts and they're supporting them. And our local commercial districts are thriving in Portland. And it's one of the reasons why we see 33 bike corrals on the streets in our local commercial districts and another 50 or 60 more on the waiting list. And we just know that that is going to expand as well. Our tourism industry also loves bikes. They are actively promoting bicycling because bicycling has done a lot to create a positive image for Portland. And in tourism, it's all about creating a positive image. We've got the most positive national and international press about bicycling than anything else. And in fact, it's why they awarded the city their highest tourism award this past year. This is a web page. This is the banner off their website. So this is our city's tourism agency who says, curbside parking available, right? Plenty of good parking in Portland. It's also about traffic engineering. Our system works better. Our system works for cars as well today as it did 17 years ago because bikes are on the road. Now, why is that? On one of our bridges, we have seen a 20% increase in the total number of vehicles on the bridge. That includes both bikes and cars. Fairly typical for a region where population is growing, where economic activity is growing. You're going to see more demand for mobility. That's what's happening. But the total number of vehicles includes both bikes and automobiles. The increase in automobiles has only been about 1%. The whole rest of that increase has been by bicycles. Had that increase all been automobiles, had there been 20% more automobiles on this particular bridge, the intersections that lead the bridge would have failed. They wouldn't have worked. They would have blown up. The bridge itself wouldn't have been able to handle all the traffic. You would have gotten congestion. And the way to address congestion is to, well, the standard way is to build a bigger intersection, add more travel lanes. We can't afford to do that. Because all of that increased demand for mobility has been by the bike, this intersection works as well today as it did in 1991. And that's why our city traffic engineer, who really has a lot, obviously, to say about how the city's traffic system operates, that's why he says that bikes are the most efficient way to provide for the mobility of our citizens. And that's why he's very interested in expanding our bike network. We are seeing biking taken seriously as a means to address climate change. Our county's climate change action plan is calling for a 30% bike mode split. We are trying to adhere to the Kyoto Protocol in our county, doing what we can. And the transportation sector accounts for 40% of greenhouse gas emissions in my county, where Portland sits, Multnomah County. Getting a 30% bike mode split is going to go just a little ways towards addressing greenhouse gases. It's not going to do everything. It's not even going to come close to doing everything. But whatever reductions we achieve in greenhouse gases by encouraging more bike use are going to be the least expensive gains that we realize. And that's why we're calling for a high mode split. Our regional government is calling for us to triple non-automotive trips. And they're calling for very high bike use. And they control the federal purse strings. And so they select projects to fund, transportation projects to fund, based on their criteria. And they're calling for a dramatic increase in non-automotive trips. Our city is about to update our comprehensive plan. We're calling for creating 20-minute neighborhoods. Neighborhoods where you can walk or bike to meet all of your daily needs within 20 minutes, so that you don't have to drive. Portland is already a 20-minute neighborhood for biking. You can get to every grocery store, bakery, coffee shop, bar, whatever, park, school. Bars always come before parks and schools. I gotta think about that a little bit. It's already a 20-minute neighborhood. What's lacking is the infrastructure so that people will feel very comfortable in making that 20-minute bike ride. So they could do it if the facilities were there. And finally, in our bike master plan, we're calling for a more than 25% mode split. So how do we get here? this is really the crux of what we've done. If you remember nothing else about the Portland story, it's this. Build it and they will come. This was our bikeway network in 1980. The Green Line is a bike boulevard. It's a low-volume street that works well for bikes. We make capital improvements on that street to make it work better. We restrict car traffic, we slow down car traffic, we make it easy to cross the main streets. The blue lines are bike lanes, standard 1.5 meter bike lane, and the magenta lines are off-street paths. That's what our system was in 1980. That's what our system is today. It's about a 300-mile network of bikeways. If you are moderately skilled as a cyclist, which basically means you can get on a bike and not fall over. If you are somewhat traffic tolerant, right? If you're willing to ride on the street with about 1.5 meter bike lanes, it's a busy street, you can ride easily throughout Portland for all your daily business. You really almost don't need a car. I do own a car. I can't remember the last time I drove it. I typically ride bikes. I've got 2 kids. Sometimes my youngest daughter, at 7, sometimes we drive places if we're late, but mostly driving is about going to the mountains or going to the coast. We don't drive around town. Bicycling is cool again in Portland. It used to be teenagers didn't want to bike, but my son is 17. The other day, a friend of his came over to the house with this really sweet black with white detail, single speed bike, 1 brake only. And I looked at that bike and I'm like, man, everybody's got a cooler bike than me. Everybody's got a cooler bike than me. My bike is just this black clunker, it's just it's all, paint is all chipped, it's got some weird flower on the back, but I think in the middle, it's just ugly, but it works really well. So biking is cool again, it's among 17-year-olds, and the reason it's cool again among the 17-year-olds is because it's really cool for 20-year-olds. We've got this great culture of 20-year-olds who are riding bikes everywhere, and they've made it really cool, and it's popular in the media. And bikeportland.org makes it look really fun. And we have like 4,000 annual events and rides in Portland, some of which involve being completely naked. And so, 17-year-olds really like this stuff. And so biking is cool. Years ago it wasn't cool. Everybody wanted to get a car. Everybody wanted to drive. My son is 17. The driving age in America is 16. Oregon is 16. He doesn't have his license yet. He doesn't need it. He does not need his license. He wants his license, but he hasn't prioritized it because he's really busy with other things. One of which is not riding naked. But he's really busy with a lot of other things. And he can get around town just fine using transit and walking, and that's what he does. We have done, most of our designs are very standard designs. Most of our stuff is really standard. But we have done some innovative things. We have taken international best practices and adapted them to a US context to highlight problem areas. Right? So the intersections are typically places where you run into the most problems as any kind of road user. And so we've done things at intersections and conflict areas to really highlight and make motorists more aware. I think one of the things that you really have to do with bicycling is make it very visible. You want to make it very visible on the street. And so bike lanes are just a very visible indication of biking in the city. Bright green at intersections and at potential conflict areas is another way of making bicycling visible. The presence of cyclists themselves is another way, obviously, of making cycling very visible. Those graphs and charts that I showed at the